Hey, Zach, I'm your cult boyfriend. I think Kevin Williamson should get a lot of credit, and I don't mind giving him more credit than he deserves. Kevin Williamson is a master, not of horror, he's a master of teen drama. And what Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, The Faculty, what those films are, they are like Dawson's Creek. He was a showrunner of and created it, and it's possibly the most beautiful piece of art on the planet. But Kevin Williamson, these are teen dramas where some of the characters happen to die, but like at their core they are teen dramas, and teen dramas at their core are deconstructions of youth, so they're postmodern in essence. Then when you apply that to the horror genre, to the slasher genre, which I think for a long time they were films targeted for teenagers that never actually spoke to teenagers until Kevin Williamson. When Kevin Williamson wrote Scream, or he wrote Scream 2, and I Know You Last Summer, in The Faculty, when he came in, those films actually spoke to teenage problems through archetypes that they feel that they've been around forever because everyone's media obsessed in the 90s. We're going to figure out who the best archetypes, who the best characters are. First up, we have Randy Meeks, who is going to go directly to S for me. Over time, he's become a bit of an unofficial mascot for the film series. I think that while he's not necessarily healthy, he's the healthiest that someone can be when they're raised on pop culture. I think that Randy and Kirby are like the two healthiest cinephiles that Kevin Williamson ever wrote, and they still have a bunch of fucking like hangups and issues, right? But they're more they're like if Dawson Leary was in Scream, he'd be a killer, like no question about it. But Randy Meeks and Kirby, we see like these healthy forms of cinephilia. And if you watch my analysis of Randy's death, what strikes me the most about this character is the fact that he's tortured by the narrative that he's in the second film. And in the first film, he's more humiliated because that's his archetype. He's supposed to be just this geek, just kind of like, a little like kind of neurotic, ugly, but kind of antisocial, but still pretty intelligent, like comic relief character who's normally there to be humiliated by the horror movie until they're killed, right? He's like Crispin Glover in Friday the 13th 4. He's like every character. There's a character like that in every single great slasher movie. And he was definitely supposed to die, but he was an afterthought to the narrative itself. So the narrative itself even forgot that he was relevant because he is irrelevant, but he accidentally survived for the first movie. And then we get Scream 2, which sometimes I like Scream 2 way more than Scream 1. Sometimes. What makes Scream 1 so fucking interesting, and Scream 2 as well, is that predictive cinema, I don't know if that's a real thing. It should be a real thing because it absolutely exists. Predictive cinema. What makes Kevin Williamson so fascinating to me, on top of all of the great composition and writing and like archetypal deconstructions I've been talking about, is that he seemed to not only predict but diagnose a problem within youth culture that was about to explode, right? Like it's hard to imagine that Columbine was just around the corner from Scream 2, and The Faculty. It's hard to imagine that. And it's so crazy to hear Mickey say, I'm gonna blame the movies. It is fucking terrifying, sends chills up and down my spine, seeing Billy Loomis stabbing Stu in the kitchen going, uh, don't you blame the movies, Sid. Movies don't make psychos. Movies make psychos more creative. I don't know how Kevin got this. Scream 1 is about two media obsessed fucking homoerotic fucking high school best friends who kill their girlfriends and kill their principal, who kill their classmates because they learned that from the media. They started to make their own film in a large way. They were media obsessed, and they were just fucking stupid. These weird walking hard-ons with psychopathy. And if you have to connect the dots to like Dylan and Eric and Columbine, and like because it's not just once that Kevin did that. It was I Know What You Did Last Summer. It was Scream 2. It was The Faculty. It was even Teaching Mrs. Tingle. Like he did that constantly. And a lot of aspects of Dawson's Creek are diagnosing this strange media obsession, this kind of Guy Debord Society of the Spectacle post-structuralist thing, where life has been replaced by its representation. Like, life is inauthentic now. We don't live within life. Everything within life has been replaced by its representation. Like Mickey said, life imitating art, imitating life. It's like as if Sydney's life is becoming a cartoon and Sydney is us. Sydney, like our entire lives are cartoonish at this point. That's incredible to me that Kevin Williamson was able to diagnose a problem like that. And that's why I call it predictive cinema. And you know it was predictive. You knew it struck a chord because after Columbine and certainly after 9/11, Kevin Williamson's school of horror filmmaking, which was called trendy horror back then, because it was trendy. It was definitely the WB with gore, which I actually really appreciate and love, because I think it's interesting when the industry um, shows favoritism to an ideology, especially postmodernism, and then everything is deconstructed, and it makes the society, the spectacle, even more all-consuming and intoxicating. But after 2001, for sure, like Final Destination may have been the last really postmodern teen slasher movie. That way of thinking was done, and then we fell into this kind of loop of remakes that were secretly about, like, or at least subconsciously about our responses to 9/11 anxieties. But the postmodernism was done. We wanted life to be life itself, however insincere that may be. We wanted our lives to seem more sincere, whereas Scream and Scream 2, I think, are they know that sincerity is a virtual impossibility within a world that is more cinematic than it is genuine. Our lives are movies, and movies are our lives, and it's a loop. And Randy is such a beautiful example of this character who is completely fucking doomed, and he knows he's doomed because he's a cinephile, and like you and I right now, he knows all the rules, he knows all the films, and he knows, how the fuck did I survive that first movie? Because I'm definitely not going to live through this movie. Hopefully they're more original and I get to even get the girl this time, but something in him knows he's ultimately doomed. It's so tragic when a character knows, when an archetype understands his design, understands his function, and his function is body count. You can see that in that scene with Dewey when he's going over the rules of a sequel, like Carnage Candy, more blood, more gore. Your core audience just expects it. You can kind of see it in his performance that he knows that he's cooked. Randy is kind of always around the word originality. He comes down on sequels for not being original. So they're like, okay, Mr. Originality, what would you do different? He said, I'd let the geek get the girl, whatever. He also like tries to shame Ghostface on the phone for not being as original as the first one was, and I think because he's praying that Scream 2 is just as original as the first film, because the only reason his archetype, and I do this as archetypes, not really characters, the only reason his neurotic geeky archetype survived when traditionally he definitely would not, was because the first film was all about subverting tropes. So like he's like, please be just as original, or else I'm cooked, or else I'm fucking dead. And also, don't be really original. If I got to be the hero, that'd be a true subversion. Fuck this Jerry O'Connell guy. Let me get the girl. Let me be the hero. But of course, that's not in the cards. Scream 2 is actually fascinating because Scream 1 deconstructs all the tropes and doesn't play into any of them. But Scream 2 plays directly into them the entire time, though, making you think that they're not going to do that they're going to do the same thing as Scream 1, but they do the opposite, and the opposite is almost tradition. The opposite is almost convention, which makes it even more terrifying because it's so inescapable for an archetype like Randy to survive. I agree with your main analysis about the archetype tropes and framework of Randy's death. It's very interesting and compelling. I just don't think it needs to be Mickey on the phone and cinephile v cinephile in that moment to hold up. I actually think there are very subtle differences in Ghostface's calls movie to movie. Roger Jackson even says that because it's a different killer each movie, that he plays it in a slightly differently each tone. I think when it's theoretically Billy on the phone or when it's Charlie or Jill, the calls are more movie obsessed. I mean, I don't know. I think that Ghostface is just the same exact personality throughout every single movie, because Ghostface does not act like any of these characters act in their reveals. Never does Ghostface act like they do. Ghostface always has the same exact sense of humor, the same sensibility, the same knowledge. I think that Ghostface is just archetypal of of a psychotic cinephile every time. It doesn't really matter who the killer is until the very end, and then we get into some cool stuff. But I get what you're saying. From what I remember, the calls in Scream 2 are not actually movie obsessed. In Randy's phone call, he's the one. It doesn't have to be movie obsessed when you've already established that Ghostface is a movie obsessed archetype. In Randy's phone call, he's the one who asks, "What's your favorite scary movie?" and mentions a bunch of college slashers. The killer doesn't answer. If it was Mickey, I would expect him to mention a horror sequel as his fave. The killer on the phone is focused on mocking and insulting Randy. Well, yeah, because it's a to me, it's still a psychotic cinephile being like, "You moron, why do you exist in this movie, you idiot? You're gonna die, dude. That's all you're gonna do." It's still a psychotic cinephile response to it. Like, you'll never be the leading man, you'll never ever get the girl. That's certainly Ghostface commenting on the framework of the film that they're in. So it's still pretty movie obsessed. In fact, it's more movie obsessed than the others. He's just not dropping names. He's actually talking about the way that the film is designed. Like, it's even more meta contextual. The Ghostface calls in the two seem to line up more with the ideas of putting on a good show and good old fashioned revenge. No, disagree. But yo, I'll heart you, and I'll just say disagree respectfully. Okay, Drew Barrymore in Scream 1. Now, how do we rank this, right? Because, like, we're not doing character. Once again, we're looking at mechanisms of plot, what they represent, and talk about an opening. Talk about an opening to a massive franchise. Talk about the true introduction of trendy postmodern teen thought, that is both predictive cinema and intoxicating at the same time. Not only by using someone whose face we all recognize, whose face is of old Hollywood. So you're kind of murdering old Hollywood by murdering someone like Drew Barrymore, who, John and Lionel Barrymore, this great lineage going back to the dawn of popular Hollywood film. By destroying that, you are saying postmodernism is here. Get ready to have all your tropes deconstructed, subverted, diverted. Get ready to have the world turned upside down and inside out, because we're killing royalty. The old rules, they're gone. We got new ones now. Like, so it means so much, even though, like, she's not like a huge character. Her death, like her archetype, just means so much in that moment that I'm put it at S. Because imagine all the heavy lifting that scene does. Like, now that we've seen Scream 1 through 4, all the heavy lifting done in that opening scene that seems so effortless, that seems so remarkably composed, written and acted and shot. It just lays down the rhythm, lays down the melody. I think that her death, or her scene, Drew Barrymore's scene, is momentously symbolic and significant. I love it. I love it. I mean, that's how much a sequence can do for you. Casey had the best kill. Yeah. And it's also, I think, the scariest shot, like the most purely, like, terrifying shot of the whole series is her parents finding her hanging from the tree when her face is so white and pale like a porcelain doll. Gail Weathers. I'm gonna put her just under Tatum on the A tier. I really liked Courtney Cox in this role. I really liked Gail Weathers. I like that you can say, like, since we're looking at archetypes and narrative mechanisms, like, she's kind of representative of sensationalist media and how sensationalist news media interacts with youth violence, youth culture, the problems of youth, which normally are in shallow and egotistical and narcissistic ways, because that's like part of her character arc as she becomes more understanding, selfless, and courageous. I think it's a lot more sophisticated than even that, because I think that Kevin Williamson is putting some sense of dignity and resolve in her character from the beginning. Like there is a reason why news media has such power in the first place, but it is pretty narcissistic and shallow at that point, and it learns how to interact with the trauma that young people experience, I think, in ways that are more sincere as the series goes on. She seems to keep making the same mistakes, and perhaps that's saying something about news coverage as well. Like, you think she's changed, and then she writes that book about the Cotton Weary thing, and I guess she was right about the Cotton Weary thing overall, but she definitely didn't think about how it would affect Sydney, which causes Sydney to punch her in 2 different movies. But I think she's interesting if we view her as symbolic of how the news covers, how the news interacts, how media itself interacts with the trauma experienced by teenagers, and how that kind of changes over time. Um, you talk a lot about deconstruction and postmodern, but isn't that used really? Yeah, yeah. Dewey is deconstructed in Five. Well, Scream 5, they're trying to do the postmodern thing, but they don't understand how to do it, right? Like, well, there's two problems with it. I guess the first problem is that they don't understand how to do postmodernism because they have all these weird supernatural, at least with like Billy, they make it basically have him be a ghost, and you can't really do that in postmodernism. Like religion and supernatural shit, that's the first thing to go. Like modernism killed that. That's like way old hat. And like I guess the other postmodern things that it does, that flourishes, seem really superficial. And you're right, a lot of films that did deconstruction is really bad. And the reason is because I think we moved past postmodern. Like I would complain actually about a movie being postmodern now because I think that spoke to culture in the late 90s and early 2000s, or in the 90s and the early 2000s, like 15 years tops, right? Tops. I think that postmodernism's old fashioned now. And like when we see deconstruction now, it's unnecessary. Like, why are you doing that? But we've already done this. I don't know if new sincerity is a new way. I'm not a genius. I don't know what the next philosophy or primary ideology of Hollywood or filmmaking is supposed to be now, but I know it's not supposed to be postmodernism. It'd be like you hear a fucking rock album today. Imagine hearing a rock album today. I mean, even rock is old hat. Imagine hearing a rock album though today that was still talking about the same shit Nirvana were. You'd be like, okay, I bet this was cool 33 years ago. Like it doesn't make the philosophy dumb, but it makes your film not only irrelevant but annoying, because a large part of deconstructionism is playing with the audience and annoying them, almost antagonizing them. And I think the only time we really wanted that was when, like Nirvana Nevermind would come out and like the music itself would annoy you in a really good way. It was when we needed to deconstruct those structures. Now we don't have to deconstruct the structures. They've already been deconstructed. I mean, I think the right thing to do would be to try to rebuild them in sincere ways. I thought that's what Gen Z were going to do. Like, we can't do the same thing. Just like how excessive, like greedy kind of Reagan-ish or Ayn Randian kind of like movies weren't popular in the 90s, even though the 80s was all about excess, right? Like philosophy, modes of thinking, they go in and out of style. And postmodernism, when it's done today, I don't think it's done as well as Kevin Williamson and Quentin Tarantino would do it back in the day. But more importantly than that, it's unnecessary to do now. Like, it shouldn't be done now. There should be something else that takes its form or takes its place. People like to say meta modernism is that, but like, tell me what the difference is between postmodernism and meta modernism, because I'm not smart enough to make that distinction. They're virtually the fucking same, and I've seen postmodernism. Like, just blow my brains out already. Come up with something cool. Do something different. Do something really innovative. Where's your innovation, huh? Why copycat two high school loser ass dickheads? Like, filmmakers today should be smarter than me. So like, imagine, like, Mickey's the one who kills her, right? And I think her death scene is really scary, really tense, really suspenseful, moving over that cop car. I mean, and the fact that Ghostface, this symbol of postmodernism, hijacked Law and Order, hijacked the cop car and crashed it into a fucking wall, I think is pretty fascinating on its own. Like, that's a really cool image, a philosophical image to ponder and think over, mull over in your mind. And the fact that the first person Ghostface kills when Ghostface gets out of the cop car is a black woman, I think is also like pretty meaningful, especially if we go back to Jada Pinkett Smith's commentary in the beginning, the very beginning of Scream 2, and apply that to the rest of the film. And like, she's kind of telegraphing, like I said, how the horror genre not only ignores but punishes black representation when it has it. And that's a pretty good example of it in a couple different ways. And like, postmodernism is doing that all with this kind of like ironic, sadistic glee. Haley should have fled the scene like the cameraman. She should have, but that's such a good death in Scream 2. I love them crawling over Ghostface while he's knocked out. That shit is tense as fuck, dude. And I like the imagery of it. Like I said, postmodernism passed out in a fucking cop car after like stealing and destroying the idea of justice. Like, if we're viewing that as representative of that, Dewey sucks. But also like, hey Jane, but also think about Dewey too, as being symbolic of justice within a postmodern world. Dewey is possibly the worst cop of all time, which is kind of saying that cops are fucking goofballs, that they are like mostly ineffective, not only ineffective, but stupid, borderline stupid. I think it's making a lot of different comments. I like Dewey because he's kind of adorable to me. I think he's adorably stupid. But if we view him as representative of the police, of police presence within postmodernism, it's saying an awful lot, and none of it's very complimentary to the police, which is pretty dope. Fuck. Yeah, thank God for films portray cops as dummies. Yeah, I like that. I think that's a reason to at least appreciate Dewey as a character, for sure. Like, because that's what he's representing. And, I like that it isn't immature enough to go like, oh, and Dewey's a psychopath. Like, no, he means well. He's just a fucking moron who has no conception of like spatial or human awareness or self-preservation. I think that's a better critique of American cops, honestly, than they all suck. I think they're within the horror genre, they're goofballs who are completely ineffective. Because you have to remember, this is like a critique of culture, but a critique of culture within cinematic context, or you know what I'm saying? Life imitating art, imitating life. Blah, blah, blah. So now we're at Gail's first cameraman from the first film, who doesn't have a whole lot to do, right? He just gets his throat cut. But once again, we get like the poetry and the mechanics of archetype and philosophy within his death. Because what is he looking to? Like, what's his lifeline to what's going on inside that house? It's the monitor. It's the secret camera he has. So he's viewing media. He's viewing the film to know what's going on in there. And he sees an opportunity to save Randy's life, right? And I think that's when he runs out of the van. But then he forgets it's on a 30-second delay. So he's betrayed by the moving image. He's betrayed by the video that he's watching. He's betrayed by the framework of the film. He's betrayed because he thought that Ghostface is going to kill Randy, but he should have known that it's about subverting. No, he shouldn't have known. But we know that it's about subverting expectations. So he's going to let Randy live for no good fucking reason and come out and kill you instead. But he doesn't know that because he's following the normal rules. So he's betrayed by the tropes of the horror genre, and he's betrayed by the moving image itself that we see in that van. So that death is interesting. His character isn't, but he's interesting enough. That death is interesting enough to go to the top of the C tier. Here is Kelly Rutherford from the very beginning of Scream 3, like Cotton Weary's girl. She's a non-character. She's very attractive. The only reason I have her here is because she played Serena van der Woodson's mom on Gossip Girl, and I wanted to have an opportunity to say that that Gossip Girl is one of the finest works of art ever made. That's all. That's the only reason she's here. That's at the end of the C tier, because no matter how much of a non-character she is, she's really fun to look at. Whatever. But Kelly Rutherford, she's cool. Watch Gossip Girl. Be real cinephiles and watch Gossip Girl, guys. Kirby. Speaking of real cinephiles, this is an A tier. This is above Tatum on the A tier. I haven't watched Scream 6, so I don't know what she's like in Scream 6. I don't really care what she's like in Scream 6. In Scream 4, she's excellent. I think she has the most in common with Randy out of every cinephile, even more than Robbie. She and Randy have the most in common with each other. They strike me as really similar in a lot of different ways. And through Kirby, we can actually see how the perception of cinephile has changed since kind of postmodernism made that sort of obsession with art a bit more, I would say, sexy, actually. That could happen. It's a possibility. Like, cinephiles aren't as fucking dorky as Randy anymore, even though we do see that within Robbie. It's possible for cinephiles to be cool. And also, we're stepping outside of just guys being obsessed with films too. Kirby character's so likable. When she got stabbed, it hurt me. I don't like that she's back in 6. I think that Scream 4 is so much more powerful if Kirby is dead there. In my canon, she's dead. In my canon, she won that game of trivia with Ghostface. She won it. She won it with flying colors, knocked the ball out of the park, fucking out cinephiled Charlie, probably, right? That's probably who was like, it doesn't matter who. Charlie and Jill were both obsessed with films. Out, and also Ghostface to me is just this psychotic cinephile who doesn't really have different personality. Ghostface always has the same sardonic one. But she outdid the ultimate cinephile serial killer. You know what? Handled the conversation definitely better than Randy did in Scream 2. like completely, like verbally eviscerated Ghostface as far as I'm concerned, and then she still dies. That, come on, it's a horror movie. Like, that should happen. Like, even though you won, you went off script, you improv. I already planned this death scene. You have to die. I like that a little bit more. I like her being dead. It adds to it. It makes it so it makes it actually tragic, or else I'm really not sad about the characters dying. Like, she'd be the character death that I would care the most about in Scream 4, and without her death being canon, I don't really care about the character deaths. Jada Pinkett Smith in Scream 2, to me, is A tier. Well, she's below Tatum, but above Gale. By talking about the other Black characters in Scream 2, I've kind of talked about why I think she's so important, because she vocalizes how the Black community has been ignored and then punished by the horror genre itself. She vocalizes that, and I think she makes a pretty strong and biting critique of not only like the horror slasher movies of the past, but of the horror movies, of the films that Kevin Williamson at the moment is popularizing in a huge way, like another opportunity to humiliate or ignore the Black community. And I think Kevin's trying to do something different, right? Trying to, but also Scream 2 is about, as we've covered, by Randy's death and by Derek's death. We're covering that Scream 1 is about subverting tropes. Scream 2 is fixed. And that's what makes it so tragic. Scream 2 is fixed. And there are political tragedies in that as well. And it's almost as if postmodernism is latching itself onto a genre like the slasher film, like the horror genre. Suddenly the treatment of the Black community by horror films is becoming not only hyper violent but trendy and fundamentally placed within ideology and artistic frameworks too. Like there are a lot of complications to her inclusion there, and I think Jada Pinkett Smith does wonderfully in that opening. She's extremely engaging, really good performance, and her death is amazing. And it means, come on. Some people have come down on me for like talking about like kind of like the racial implications of that opening, but as she wanders up on stage bleeding to death, she stands there looking at a sea of ghost face, a sea of white faces who are cheering on the death of a young Black woman on a stage, on a screen. And then she drops, and then Scream 2, and it's powerful as fuck if you really take it in. Um, Talking about it just now is kind of unsettling to me, how well done that is, and just how pitiful Jada Pinkett's final look at that sea of white ghost faces is. Jada played the shit out of that character and looked cute while doing it. Fuck yeah, she did. She's hot, bro. That painful cry at the end. Yeah, look where'd that come from? Ladies and gentlemen, praise be to the heavens above, for we are at Jill Roberts. Oh my God. Does she go to the top of the S? Does she dethrone Randy Meeks? Because I'm in love with Jill Roberts, Emma Roberts. She's the fucking dopest. She is so cool. Where do I even start with Jill? Oh my God, I don't want friends. I want fans. What am I supposed to do? Work? Like, she's so real, bro. Okay. So Kevin Williamson, like we talked about earlier, diagnosing youth culture, did that really well with Billy, Stu, and Mickey. So what's like 2011 youth culture like? It's obviously a little bit more narcissistic, and postmodernism has been accelerated to such a rapid point that there isn't, like I said earlier, there is no like authentic life. Life has been replaced by its representation. It's skied aboard on fucking methamphetamine at this point. It's a society of the spectacle on crack cocaine. And Jill Roberts is a perfect example of this, is to become a survivor, become famous through composing her own a traumatic hero's journey. And it doesn't necessarily matter what actually happens. What matters is what the media says about you and the media's expectations of you. Cinema's acceptance of you is found within media's expectations of you. Emma Roberts is my favorite performance in the Scream series, I think without a doubt. That was really incredible, and that should be a huge compliment. A huge compliment. I think she was better than Neve Campbell overall through the series. Emma was electrifying to watch, and it's really fucking lovely to see Kevin at least attempt to diagnose the next generation of psychotic, violent teenagers. I quite like that. S tier, without a doubt, Jill Roberts is my girlfriend. I believe that you're her biggest fan. She's phenomenal. Love her to death. Love her to death. She's not going anywhere but the S tier. I'm just considering putting her above Randy, but Randy, he's got my favorite horror movie death of all time, though. I don't think I can put her above Randy. Jill's so innocent looking and the mastermind of madness. She's sick yet so fascinating. I guess family betraying you is another hurt. Sid can't catch a break. And also, like, when we talked about Drew Barrymore's inclusion and like what that meant on like a meta level, on a self-referential one to Scream, like her being of Hollywood legacy, and in the first opening scene of the Scream franchise, horror legacy is eviscerated and hung from a tree. What does like Emma Roberts represent then, right? Does she represent some sort of nepotism? Does she represent the lineage of shit of the lineage of horror movies itself, or a postmodernism, or do we go hyper specific with it? And she's a lineage of like 80s excess because her father Eric Roberts, and because of like Julia Roberts. Is she like, is she the lineage of the romanticization of film? Like there are a lot of ways to view her, even her inclusion, even just Emma Roberts' inclusion, like as herself, and like what that is saying here, like, and how that's informing the rest of Scream 4. That's so fucking fascinating. And yeah, she is related to Sydney, right? So much she wow. Okay, what about this? Sorry. This is like I didn't think about what I was gonna say, so I'm blowing my mind with you. But she's related to Sydney. She is the next generation. She's what Sydney gave birth to. She's what Scream 1 through 3 gave birth to. And when what they gave birth to is something deeply psychotic, something deeply scary, something deeply narcissistic, and something, like you said, that appears to be so innocent, but is truly anything but. Like, Jill Roberts is the result of what postmodernism did to teen films. And the result is terrifying. It's attractive, but it's vicious. That's what it is. That's what Jill Roberts is. It's vicious, in a word. I like the meta commentary on Scream 4, what the killers represent. A metaphor for studios remaking, rebooting horror franchises. It preemptively satirized. It did. So, like, I don't understand the point of Scream 5 satirization. Like, we already did that, I thought. You know what I mean? It's so cool finding the archetypes in Scream 4 and placing them within the archetypal designs of Scream 1, and just what it means to remake. And like, how do you make a great remake? Is that you take the essentials of the first and you apply it to modern woes, anxieties, and dynamics, which is exactly what Jill Roberts did, and technically what Wes and Kevin did as well. The meta commentary on remaking and rebooting, if we extend that to not just cinema but to our actual lives, because in postmodernism, in the Scream universe, our lives are cinematic. There is no actual difference between the two. That's what makes Ghostface so psychotic every time. When you are imagine having to experience the same exact trauma 4 times. Imagine a final girl who doesn't seem to have amnesia, and that's when we get Sydney. That's when we get Sydney. And it's children doing it in the 4th film. It's teenagers. It's your own blood. It's betrayal and it's vicious, and I fucking love it. Yeah, I'm thinking that Jill Roberts is my favorite Ghostface. Cotton Weary. This motherfucker's A tier for me. He's at the end of the A tier, but he's A tier. Liev Schreiber was great. Great. I think he's great in Scream 3. I like his opening. That's the proper way to open Scream 3 is with his death. But in Scream 2, that's really where he is. He's like the victim. Well, okay, Isabel has this reading of Scream 2 as Cotton being representative of film itself and how film has been given a bad name and tarnish, and people are trying to like frame film for crimes that it didn't do. And and film isn't entirely innocent, right? Because remember, Cotton only saves Sydney's life if Sydney promises to do a Diane Sawyer interview. Only if Sydney agrees to make him more famous and kind of uh, redeem his reputation within the public. And that's interesting. He's representative of a lot. I think that Liev Schreiber's performance is great in Scream 2. My favorite scene with him is when he confronts her in the library and he's like, Sidney Prescott, everyone's favorite fucking victim. And he's speaking like so clearly about the narrative system of the film, about the archetypal systems of the film, and about how he is unaccepted by it. Like, you can call him a red herring if you want, but largely he's unaccepted by the narrative system. And he's kind of pissed off about that. I like them. Stu. You can go right up there with your boyfriend Billy. Sydney can go above Randy on the S tier. The most dignified, the most meaningful, the most impactful, the most significant, and the most beautiful final girl that there has ever been. It's about Sydney desperately trying to hold on to some sense of authenticity while the world around her becomes more and more cartoonish, which is to say more and more cinematic. And Neve Campbell is extraordinary in every film that she appears in. I love her.